My favorite chapter in your book touched on a point you brought up in the lecture about this hyper rate of change itself. It is a core cause of backlash and fear. I myself am perplexed by my computer. It's just so frustrating. What is your advice to young people, and all of us for that matter, to adapt to this future of hyper change?
Look, it's very hard because there's no question it's faster than at any previous point in history. You just have to look at the data. As I was saying to you, think about the number of countries that have entered the global economy in the last 30 years, right? If you looked at the expansion of the global economy in the 50s, you would have said, oh yeah, Japan came online, and then maybe South Korea came online. So that's like 100 million people. And I'm telling you, 2.5 billion people. And by the way, that's not even counting Latin America and all. You know, if you put it all together, it's like 3 billion people in a 10-year period joined the global economy. If you look at the transformation of what the information technology, as you're suggesting, Grandel, it's just, you know, and you can see it in the numbers. The first 100 million people to use Google, I think it took 10 years. The first 100 million people to use Chat GPT was, I think, in 3 weeks. Right? So it's like we're just seeing a kind of crazy acceleration of change. You know, I wish I could tell you that I had some Yoda-like advice on this. Look, I think the most important thing you can do is to not back away from it in fear. You know, don't lean away from this stuff. Lean into it. It's not that hard. Don't get bamboozled by fancy names and things like that. Find somebody who can explain it to you. Find people, you know, this stuff is not so overwhelming that you know, try it out. You know, use Chat GPT. Don't tell yourself, oh my God, I don't know what this is. It's very simple. And by the way, when you use it, you will discover it has its real limitations. Let me give you an example just to demystify. So in writing this book, at one point, I was, you know, and I tried to use it. It was honestly not very helpful, but I tried to use it. And I asked it at one point, I said, give me the name. This never made it in the book, but I had a thought that I was in the conclusion going to talk about all the great controversial liberals and all the super controversial positions, which turned out to be right over time. You know, so I was going to pick Eleanor Roosevelt, who was, you know, the most controversial political figure in the United States in the 30s and 40s. So controversial, her husband couldn't formally endorse a lot of her views. But if you think about everything she stood for, universal rights of man, equality for Jews and the Gentiles, for blacks and whites, better working conditions for children, women being allowed to go to law schools and college. Every one of them is now conventional wisdom. Like, you can't imagine somebody oppose that, but there were people opposing every single one of those things that she did. And so I said to Chat GPT, give me a quote from one of the most prominent opponents of Eleanor Roosevelt's policies. And Chat GPT, you know, immediately, if those of you who's used it, you know it's sometimes in error but never in doubt. It says, sure, Senator Thomas Beebe of Missouri, and here's the quote. Well, there was a Senator Thomas in Missouri, the Senator Thomas Beebe. He was an opponent of Eleanor Roosevelt. The quote is completely manufactured. So I then go back and ask it, okay, and I try out 3 or 4 other periods in history where I say, every time it's the same thing, except one time it actually made up a name, and one time it gave me, for FDR, it gave me the name of Harold Ickes. For those of you who remember, Ickes was FDR's Secretary of the Interior, highly unlikely to be a great critic of his boss. So I call up a couple of people who know these systems well, and I said, what's going on? And they said, the best answer I got was, you have to understand, this is not a bug, this is a feature of Chat. What is Chat GPT? It is a language, LLM, these are large language models, which effectively take whatever they have, you know, they sweep through everything they've read, and they predict what is the next most likely word that I should be saying. So what it was, on the basis of everything it was saying, this is the most likely quote that somebody like Thomas Beebe would have had about Eleanor Roosevelt's policies. And it was basically true. That was a reasonably good hallucination or imagination of what Thomas Beebe, but it wasn't an actual factual quote. And so what I realized is these are not yet information retrieval models. They are language generation models. That's why they're so good when you ask it to do something like this. Can you write a toast for me for my cousin's birthday in the style of Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven? Right? Because now you're saying to it, hallucinate, imagine, come up with stuff. And when you, but when you ask it something that is more focused and specific, I have always found, and the reason I find it not very useful, it's sort of giving you a college freshman's bullshit essay that has some kind of like, you're kind of impressed that they got covered most of the points, but it's a little thin and it's a little vague, and that's what I mean. So don't at the end of the day, we can always unplug the machine. The people who think the AI is going to take over the world and destroy human civilization, I just have one comment, which is the off switch, right? Like they don't have an off switch on us, we have an off switch on them.